was it that represented this gap? And as the decades went by, scientific and technological developments allowed researchers to understand DNA methylation with the involvement of RNA and creating new technologies, which all contributed to the collective knowledge on gene expression and its various influences. Although the true definition of genetics still remains highly debated, the concept of genetics is still linked to the observations made from the epigeneticist Waddington in 1939. Its study of heritable gene expression that do not originate from the changes in DNA sequences. The study of how your behaviors and your environment alters the way your genes function. Monozygotics, or identical twins, like we saw in the previous post, have become the face of epigenetic studies, because if two people are born with the same genetic code, how do they grow into distinct individuals with juxtaposing personalities and faces that are different, right? And they may even face different diseases in their lives. Some studies have shown that despite identical twins being born with the same genome, their environment will induce epigenetic additions to their code to increase or decrease certain traits of varying lifestyles over the course of their lives. So, did you know if a twin suffers from a bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, the other twin's risk of contracting the same is increased by 50%. That's 50% just by virtue of being within proximity to another that has somewhat of a similar code to you. As you can only imagine, that the codes of humanity in comparison to the codes of, let's say, our closest animal, mammal, the monkey, is actually even more closely related than we actually assume. So imagine what would happen if an entire species had a 50 or even less, 20% chance of being affected by each other. Whilst this statistic has significant weight, if the twins had the same DNA sequence, one wouldn't expect the likelihood of getting the same illness to vary by 50%. So scientists have attributed this difference to epigenetics, and since one twin's epigenome can vary significantly from the others, how do we know that that's even working in that way? So what is epigenetics, and what's the epi of the genetics? This term is derived from a Greek prefix, which means hover, to sort of like to cover. Epigenetics modifications happen when an extra layer of instructions covers the DNA, altering the way it's expressed. So the mechanisms for these alterations vary. A common one is DNA methylation, whereby a chemical group is attached to the DNA and typically blocks the gene from being read. So it's almost as if someone was blocking your eyes as you were about to see something. Histone modification is another mechanism where the gene's readability depends on chemical groups which can be added or removed. This changes how a gene is wrapped around the histone and as a result alters its expression. These mechanisms are caused by our lifestyles. What makes epigenetics so revolutionary, especially for me, is the notion that the gene expressed is affected by factors which don't stem from the gene itself. So that's basically the way that a gene responds to your environment, right? The environment surrounding us has a role, and in that way, our basic code is expressed. It affects our behaviors, our physical and mental health, our relationships, the food we eat, the environmental pollutants that surround our childhood neighborhoods, for example, can have long-term consequences on our health, the way that we work, how our job affects our mood. The genotype and environment are an interplay, right? So what we're realizing is one influences the other. The paradigm shift that epigenetics has triggered within the scientific world is having an even greater ripple effect on our understanding of relationships with our environment. So we harbor an environment, and our society that supports our needs could also have a modification of the way that we behave. Of course, these sorts of surroundings have been noted in a variety of different studies. One in particular analyzes how methylation affects well-being and has found specific methylation sites which were linked to well-being. So actually looking at the genetic code and recognizing the cause and the effect of these environmental behaviors, whilst recognizing these complex relationships between the environmental mechanisms and genetic traits which influence well-being and mental health. Other studies have specifically looked at exercises such as regular meditation on genetic expression. Meditation was found to be linked to an expression pathway, which influences one's likelihood to suffer from depression, inflammation, or cell aging. Can you believe it? So the way that you behave has an impact. The way your genetic code responds to that has the potential of so much of a non-exhaustive list of things that can be applied to this. So I think applying epigenetic knowledge to our daily lives can create somewhat of a butterfly effect of positive change. And in the past 2 years, many of us have been isolated from those that we love, that we care about because of the pandemic. And luckily, we still have technology to build connections, but some of us have suffered with our mental health more than others. And I think we can all agree that our environment affects how we develop characteristically. More than 42% of people in the US Census Bureau survey in December 2020 said that they felt symptoms of anxiety, depression, and this has increased by about 11% from the previous year. And according to researchers, social anxiety is caused by two main things: environmental factors, surprise, surprise, and our genetics. Here, mental health is linked to cyclical gene-environment relationship. Reconnecting with nature can help us cognitively and emotionally balance our mental health, especially after our experience with the pandemic. There is a Latin term, Medicatrix Naturae, which suggests that nature is healing for humans. We at Replenish Earth have used ecotherapy, and yet the term Medicatrix Naturae, meaning the healing power of nature, was introduced by Hippocrates to explain the body's ability to heal itself. In addition, biologists like Sir John Arthur Thompson provided additional interpretation of this phrase, saying that contact with the outdoor environment can also provide healing. The concept of nature's influence of well-being was virtually untested until the late 1970s, when Ulrich opened the field of ecotherapy. His pioneering research showed that changes in surgery recovery times were linked to patients' window viewing. So the more chance there is, this is you sitting in front of a desk and looking outside the window and seeing something beautiful, right? So if you've got plants and a beautiful natural reserve or a forest in front of you, where would your thoughts be in comparison to seeing more buildings and or a little a kind of a chimney coming out with pollutants in the atmosphere? So where is our relationship that we have cultivated? And so Ulrich's research on ecotherapy showed that this window view would allow patients to recover quicker than those with urban views of concrete. He showed that a patient's anxiety can be reduced when they have a view of nature instead of having a view of a wall or a ceiling. Another example was the Japanese concept of forest bathing to be popular to decrease stress. Nippon Medical School in Tokyo have found that trees emit chemicals called phytoncides, and these can change our blood composition when inhaled. So imagine being quite close to trees when we're going, for a walk in the woods, for example, being in close proximity to trees as they are secreting these phytoncides, that you're breathing that in as you're walking past them. This helps to lower our blood pressure, which makes us even more calm. By immersing ourselves in nature as much as possible and incorporating it into the design of buildings, it can help rejuvenate us and make us much more local to our environment, as psychologists would prescribe, that this would reduce our stress. And in order for us to do this, we also need to observe our immediate environment. As you know, you could take a second to reflect on how your body temperature is feeling right now. And in indoor environments, we're often designing these kinds of spaces for optimum response and optimum feedback into our bodies. So we becoming more aware of the way that we're feeling indoors will have a psychophysical sense of satisfaction in our bodies. And I really do believe the work of Fanger, a prominent thermal comfort scientist, has had a huge impact on the way that we have not only received the understanding of the thermodynamics of the biological factors of shock, for example, when a person goes into a very cold and, a very cold environment and then a very hot one, immediately there is no time for adaptation. And so thermal comfort engineers would call that space of time a non-steady state of comfort. So often we're designing our physical spaces for them to be of a steady state of comfort. And adaptive thermal comfort theory suggests that occupants of a building have a thermal history, which means that if we have been and are comfortable with a very specific temperature, and we go outside and that temperature changes, we become less comfortable, which means that our comfort is subjective to the way that we have trained our bodies to respond. And that production of discomfort has a huge impact on the way that, like Nicole and Humphreys have written in 2012, on the user's experience indoors. It can have an impact on your productivity. It can have an impact on the way that we use our air conditioning, for example. And Humphreys have argued that we need to consider the climate in the way that we environmentally program our indoor spaces. Imagine having huge amounts of, air conditioning. So Hishong argues that buildings should not simply give occupants satisfaction with their thermal environment, but also give you delight. Imagine the most beautiful buildings that you might have walked into, like a beautiful temple, or you go through a narrow passage and it sort of opens up and you look up at the atrium and it takes your breath away, and so there is an entire science on the way that an indoor environment can be created into a space of, as Hishong says, delight. Van Hoof and Henson recommend that a gradual change of temperature when entering a building is exactly what can move people from a cold to a warm place or warm to a cold place without giving them these thermal shocks. And I think in terms of the way that we have not just agency over our lives, but we have agency of the way that we connect with each other. These sorts of vernacular spaces really give us an opportunity to connect with and design spaces of well-being. And I strongly believe that well-being goes beyond the feeling of immediate satisfaction, and that we can develop and design places that have ecological responses as well, so that there is an opportunity to connect with the environment and understand exactly how our genes can be expressed to predicting specifically where we are susceptible to disease. Imagine if you went into an environment and you could say, well, if a person spends X amount of time here, this is what they're going to be feeling. And you could predict how they were going to be feeling, how their body was going to be responding, and what consequences there would be on multi-generational gene response, just like the research that was done with the Holocaust victims by Rachel Yehuda, who was a neuroscientist, and she, with her breakthroughs, could represent the sort of intergenerational trauma that was found in the children of the survivors of the Holocaust. So these kinds of studies have showed that we have a huge amount of opportunity, and that this growth, especially given that we've been isolated for a number of months at least to over a year, that there are almost a amount of funding that is immense. In one industrial report in 2019, they were expecting that the cost of the built environment would be something close to 2 billion by 2027. So if there is such a big growth, and there is, of course, this DNA testing with companies such as 23andMe, it gives us an opportunity to really understand where our triggers are and where those triggers can be met by environments that can support us in ways that can be good for the environment. And I think that if you were to take your genetic code, like with 23andMe, and have data sovereignty over that, you would be able to cut that code up very specifically, depending on what it is that you wanted to share, and then to be able to share that with researchers, with scientific medical staff, with the opportunity of understanding where your bespoke health needs can be met. We're not all the same. And I think that to put us all into the category that we are exactly the same is something by way of maybe a little bit too much of a lazy way of responding to the way that we feel in not only our bodies and the way that we perform in our lives. We do have a course that we're putting together, and if you take a photograph of this, you'll be able to sign up to the course. The course is called Giving More Than You Take. It's really an exploration of the way that we encourage ourselves to look beyond net zero and to walk into that world of nature positive, something that I've learned deeply from my colleagues at in the Royal Kingdom of Bhutan. To that, I am now ready for any questions. I'm going to stop sharing as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thea, for that wonderful lecture, and especially the talk, which is all about nature and which is very important that we connect with it these days. So any questions? You could type in the chat box or just raise your hand so that we can give you an opportunity to ask the question directly.
And also, I've got a question for the audience as well, and that is that, are there certain characteristics of your physical environment that can influence the way that you behave? Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that there are certain environments where you feel like you can really, meditate, for example, or you feel that you just can't meditate? That's, are you the type of person that can go into a cafe that is incredibly loud and still concentrate? Are you the type of person who would go into nature and feel that you can't find stillness? Where is the environment that you are in impacting the way that you feel? If you could adjust it, what would you do? How might you improve the space that you're in?
Well, I have tried in my life that people say I can't sleep when there's too much of sound, but I have no problem anywhere. And of course, it takes a little time in an area where there's a lot of sound to pull back yourself, and you can get to your meditation even in the loudest sounds around you. Of course, for me, being a Bhutanese from the mountains, I love mountains and forest. And that will be a serene place for me to be all the time. But having said that, I think spaces that we create is also both sides, internal and external. So to see how you would like to see outside of you, you should try and change that within yourself. That's my feeling, my belief. But I'm sure that different people have different adaptations, different likes and dislikes, different perceptions. So, yeah, that's it. I think there's a question coming up.
Yeah.
I think Palak would like to share something.
Yes, please.
Yes, ma'am, I've already shared. This sometimes happens with me. I'm not able to meditate in a room where there are no windows. I feel very distracted. I feel very distracted when there are no windows. We cannot see through, we cannot connect with nature in a place. Yeah, that happens with me.
Absolutely. What helped in your practice since then? Just recognizing that you need a window?
Yes, then I go out. there is a place, we have to focus, then I leave that place, and in fact, I go out and meditate. And that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the more, I want to call it sensitive, but I don't feel that that's the right word, that there is this nuance between the energy of a place where bioelectric organisms, Sandy's got a beautiful thing that he says about the amount of electricity that is being used and probably is required for working our bodies, the number of times that our heart pump goes off, or thought goes from one dendrite to another in the brain. So we are electric beings. So an environment which has the same resonance or frequency or wave as the one that we have, not to mention, the alpha, beta, theta, delta, all of these other waves that come out of our brain signature. And that signature is responding to the signature of the environment that you're in. And I think signature is a nice word for it, that in an environment you have tapped into a physical space that has a very specific signature. And you can tap into that feeling of, what's the name of the ancient Indian feng shui? What's the, there's a really cool...
It's called
Vastu Shastra.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I'd love to see the science that supports also that, right? And it'd be amazing to see how science has sort of caught up with this Vastu Shastra, the feng shui, the indigenous communities who have responded with these natural practices and rites of passage that relate to these signatures. And I can see here, Bayan, I think you said that you can't study if you can't see sky. Connecting with the clouds, for example, or connecting just outdoors, taking a deep breath of fresh air. These are some of the most important free things that life can offer to us. And yet we try to box them up and contain them and sell them. And it's funny because, I remember when I was going to Iceland for the first time, they had these cans and it just had Icelandic fresh air. And it made me laugh, but at the same time, I did worry that maybe we're going to get to a stage where having these cans of fresh air is like having bottles of water, because we can't find it anywhere. So we can't find bottles of water.
Yeah, so we have Jeevan also right there. He's written that thanks for your excellent presentation. Do you see a connection between you studies nature and humans is given in ancient Indian knowledge sciences, Panchabhutas?
Yeah, I am. I think, it kind of goes, I didn't read your question before I mentioned the Vastu Shastra, but I think we're realizing the power of elements, of gems, the crystalline structure of the planet, the magnetic field. Do you know about the Schumann Resonance? So the Schumann Resonance is that resonance that responds to the behavior of people on the planet. And NASA has been somewhat, documenting this Schumann Resonance of the planet. And I think there was a study that showed when there was this global meditation day that the Schumann Resonance had also responded to that. There are a number of incredible studies that show that we're almost catching up with these ancient practices. I think we had some gold wisdom, golden wisdom. And I think we went through a stage of probably feeling quite trapped by the need for scientific rigor, that we've disassociated with that ancient practice because it apparently isn't scientific enough. But I think many people that are intrigued by this, I have an ex-student of mine at NID is now looking at yoga, mindfulness, and the response to neuroscience with yoga, and how the physical exercises and the different asanas and the different mudras can have an impact on the behavior of a person. So I think we're getting to that place where we can have, a scientific basis for the research that has already been done.
Okay. So, Shumparna, you can, I think, go ahead and ask your question yourself. They're aligned right with us.
Okay. Ma'am, since we don't have much exposure to epigenetics, that's why I asked that could the change in behavior due to environment be so impactful that it can be inherited to the next generation as well?
Yes. Isn't that scary?
Yeah, pretty.
Yeah.
Because you think about the positive ones, but there can be negative ones as well.
Absolutely. Look at the Holocaust, the way that the let me look at my notes again. What was the name of the wonderful research that was done on that exact question? I think epigenetics for me became real as soon as this particular study had Holocaust exposure-induced intergenerational effects of FKBP5 methylation. Here you go. This is the study. I'll put it into the chat. Then there's an abstract. It goes into a little bit more information. Holocaust exposure had an effect on the methylation that was observed in exposed parents as well as in their offspring. These effects were observed at very particular sites of the genetic code. Interestingly, in Holocaust survivors, methylation at this site was higher in comparison with control subjects, whereas in Holocaust offspring, methylation was lower. So it's still present, but has a trigger point. So I suppose it goes back to that survival of human behavior by Darwin, right? I'm not going to say the fittest, I don't like that word. But there's a response mechanism to our environment. We have over generations of being the species recognized that we may need to go back to certain behaviors of survival. And I think even with, the Holocaust survivors, there was a survival instinct from the external environment that they were in that they needed to respond to. So I think the response mechanism, and I often, my own version of the description of epigenetics is your gene response to your environment. So there is this response mechanism that's recorded in your genes and then passed on through multiple generations. That's how important it is that we give ourselves and others the opportunity to taper how we respond and react to environments and to be conscious of what is happening at that given moment. And I'm sure Sandhu has been through a lot of the science behind the meditation process and the way that we're able to have an event that then has a response and then to be able to slow that down. So if somebody hits my arm, I don't whack them back. I think about it. I stop. I increase that space of response in the way that I want to respond. So in the book by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, he has this sort of primary response and the secondary response. The primary response in my arm example would have been to smack that person back. The secondary response would have been a little bit more considered.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so Bhashini, you go next with your question. So I suppose that's the last question of the session. So Bhashini,
yes, that's just an observation from the question that ma'am had posted earlier. So not specifically a question, but one observation that I had made, I had observed that I feel extremely uncomfortable when there is dust around me, but at the same time, I feel really rejuvenated when I walk on sand or sit on the ground, or at that point, I am touching mud, I'm touching those particles, but I don't feel uncomfortable. So I was just making an observation.
If we're sensitive to certain elements like wood or bare earth or water, these are elements that our bodies are made out of, and sometimes we need to be able to connect with them. Time to connect with those elements. I think it's really important for our bodies, given the amount of radiation that comes out electromagnetic frequencies that come out of all of our digital devices, to computer screens, to being in the vicinity of a Wi-Fi router. You need to get away from that. You need to be able to contain that. You need to be able to rejuvenate your own energy. And I think you use that well. For us, we use the term replenishing because it's like refreshing, like replenishing yourself. And so what, coming back to that question, what replenishes you? What gives you that vigor, the energy to go outside and take on another day by the horns, What is it that gives that to you? And of course, in times where it's not going the way that you want it to, in times where it's really tough to experience what you don't want to experience, a member of your family gets cancer. What do you do about that? How should you respond to that? You have to do your own emotional processing to then be present for them. And we're in these incredibly sensitive times. A lot is changing for us incredibly quickly, and we need to be in a place of peace, so that these primary responses of smacking somebody are challenged by you of whether that's the most appropriate way that you want to respond. And that's in your frame of choice, not the environment making you do something, or that you are unconscious of the fact that your environment has an impact on you, social and physical and, emotional. You imagine an emotional environment that is screaming its head off at you. Do you want to be there? How are you going to respond to that? Yeah.
So I think it's basically the difference between reacting and responding. Are you reacting or are you responding? So response is much better than a reaction.
And check out that. There's like an entire field of study called epigenetics, which gives you this background of the way that we respond to our environment, given the exact, like the cause and the effect. Is like push that button, that behavior happens as a result of that. We are really at the beginning of understanding where that is scientifically, but we know that it's happening. And so as we are picking up this response mechanism, we're like, wow, so what happens if I put, a group of roses close to me and I can smell their beautiful smell? What does that do to me? Using my senses, can I improve the experience of life that I'm having?
Thank you so much for this enlightening talk and taking time to answer each question so meticulously. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you, and hope to see you soon.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you all very much. You can follow me on Instagram and Replenish Earth, and you can follow us and, respond and get some ideas together and do some research and let us know what you're up to. We'd love to keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Ochi, would you like to play that video once? That small PPT that you play? Or do I continue?
That's for the session beginning of the session.
Okay. So, sir is joined. So, do I introduce? Sir, you're fine? Ready to go?
Yes. I have to share my screen.
Sir, I'll introduce you first and then you could take over.
You can introduce. I can share the screen.
Sure, sir.
Okay.
So our next speaker today is Professor Damodar Swar, who is a very learned and well-read person. He is the keynote speaker of today and would be speaking on the topic on happiness, meaning, correlates, and interventions. He is presently the chairperson, Social Sciences Research, KIIT Bhubaneswar, since March 2021. Before this, he was in IIT Kharagpur for a long number of years, which is almost 26 years. He was the editor of psychological studies for almost 5 years. His research focuses on social and organizational psychology, neuropsychology, and science of happiness. He has authored almost around 155 scientific articles, including 20 book chapters, one book, and co-edited 3 books, handled more than 40 research projects, 35 training programs, and supervised at least 35 PhD students, and more than 200 master's theses. Professor Suar has more than 35 years of experience in teaching, research, consultancy, training, and various levels of administration in reputed institutes such as IIT Kharagpur, IIT Bhubaneswar, IIM Ranchi, National Institute of Social Work and Social Sciences Bhubaneswar, and KIIT Bhubaneswar. He is the ad hoc reviewer of psychology and management journals of Emerald, Springer, and Elsevier since 2000, and a fellow of National Academy of Psychology since 2019. With this, I would request Professor Suar to please begin his talk.
Are my slides available to you?
No, sir, it's not with me. Orchi, do you have it?
Yes, I have it.
No, I'm asking Orchi if she has it, or anybody, any of the volunteers who have it?
No. I don't think they have it. Let me. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can see you also. So, do you? If you see at the bottom of the screen, there's a share screen option.
No, that's I have done. Share
Yes,
screen
sir.
option I have activated, and accordingly I have activated that particular slide.
Sir, the co-host, and he will have the permission to share screen.
Oh,
Okay.
so you please initiate the action from your side.
Do I have to do it?
No, ma'am. It is already done. It is already
Yeah,
done.
sir, you have. I mean, you can only do it. I think, sir, you can just shut down the process once and then do it once more. Probably the screen would be shared.
Let me complete with the screen, and then I will come and we'll share the things. Is it okay? No, I will close it once more, and then open the screen as you are telling. Okay.
Yeah, so if you do it again for share screen and do it, probably it might show up.
But I have to first open to go to share.
Sir has been muted.
Sir, you have been muted.
Sir, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, he's saying that he knows that. I mean, by his lip reading, I could understand.
Okay.
Probably he'll set it up
There
and then
is some error. It is showing. I don't know why.
So if you would share your PPT with anybody who is here, they could share it for you.
Has he been made a co-host?
Yes.
No, perhaps not.
Just be made a co-host. He wasn't.
Yeah.
So you may share your screen now. It will be
I
visible
think you can be able to share your screen now.
You can do it now.
Is it available?
No, sir, we can't see it.
What is it? A lot of difficulty I opened because there may be some problem. Have you made me the co-host?
Yes, sir. You have been made the co-host.
And perhaps I will able. Are you able to see it?
No, sir.
No?
No, sir.
Screen sharing has failed to start. Please try it again later. Error code is giving.
Sir, are you accessing Zoom via browser?
Yes.
Sir, there is a restriction upon your browser. That means that is the reason it is not permitting you to share the screen.
Okay. So what I have to do?
Sir, if you could mail me your PPT, I can play it for you. and you can give the lecture.
You could type your email address in the chat, or
Sir has my email address. If you will type Ankur, it will become his suggestion.
Okay. All the time there is technical. Here is Ankur Shukla, na?
Ankur, please confirm.
Yes, sir. Ankur 8 Shukla.
Please open it with. Please open.
Ankur, have you got it?
I'm yet to receive.
Okay, so maybe take some time, but you'll get it.
Have you got it?
Not yet, sir.
Ankur, refresh once and check.
Yes, ma'am. I'm continuously doing that.
Okay.
Yes, I got it. I got it, sir.
Got it?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Then you just show it. Second slide, you come straight.
Okay, sir.
Come to second. So in today we will be discussing about the meaning, correlates, and interventions of happiness. Coming to the meaning of happiness, there are many ways of defining it, but definitely it is important to all of you. We talk about the happiness at individual level, at the organization and community level, at the country level, and at the international level. In one of our study, when you ask the people, what are the conditions of your life, you can see the ladder. 0 is the worst possible conditions of life, 10 is the best possible conditions of life. What you feel now, what you are feeling 5 years before, and what you will be feeling 5 years from now, 5 years after. You will see here from the graph that the past and present happiness of people somewhere around 6 to 7. But the future happiness shows a mark just above 8. What it suggests? It suggests that people are optimistic about the future and they think their conditions of life will improve in future than it is in the present or it was in the past. It was a study that we have carried out same on the IIT students. Next slide, please. Please go on slide, just show it and go on. And similarly, if you look into the different countries, they also differ in different levels of happiness, somewhere around 7. And the highest happy countries are the Scandinavian countries of the globe. And they are the countries like Sweden, Finland, Norway. They are all the time they occupy the top slot on happiness survey. They are the happiest country. Why people are happy there? These are the questions must be coming to your mind. Why all the time the Scandinavian countries, particularly the Eastern Europe, they are the most happiest people in the world. Next, please. And somewhere you will find happiness when you see, sometimes you equate happiness with pleasure, peace, serenity, life satisfaction, personal fulfillment, meaning of life, even joy or humor for a short period of time. What makes us happy during the period of pandemic may not be the same before the pandemic or after the pandemic is over. You think on that. Here, for the poor person, what happens is that survival needs need to be satisfied to feel a sense of happy. Whereas before pandemic, it may not be so. For every people, there was a means of livelihood, and they are sustaining their livelihood, and many people have a decent living. But during the pandemic, that is disrupted. Here, happiness to the poor person is that how he or she can meet the basic survival needs of food, clothes, and shelter. Because industries were closed, people have to work, casual labor is stopped, people have to work from the area of the factory in Delhi or Murshidabad to the place, say for example to Odisha or say they have to move to Ranchi in Jharkhand. So happiness is a paradox also. When you equate happiness, some people say that he is all the time laughing and he is showing a very beautiful face, laughing face, he is the happiest person. And at the same time, sometimes like Richard Matthew, he was the most happiest person in the world. He was calm, quiet and serene. He was peaceful. His brain wave was studied. So therefore, if you see a sannyasi or a yogic person, you can say that he is happy. So similarly, excitement when you feel to do certain, he is a happy person, he is feeling excited. Similarly, another person is feeling calmness and we say that he is the happiest person. So therefore, happiness is a paradox. Despite these things, when happiness research has started, there are two perspectives to it. That one is associated with the hedonistic aspect of happiness, which emphasizes on attainment of leisure, avoidance of pain, and the satisfaction with life, meeting the life needs. And the eudaimonic happiness incorporates virtues, higher order values, a purposeful and meaningful life, and continuous striving for personal growth and fulfillment of the mission and goal of the life of a person. So these are the two components that were initially thought of to define the happiness. Next slide, please. Accordingly, happiness was measured, and there are recent studies we also carried out. Our study says that happiness has four components. One is the positive effects or emotions or feelings. Another is the negative feelings. Still another is the life satisfaction. And last is the flourishing. So if you look at these components, you will be finding sometimes people take, most of the time people take. Even the life satisfaction is an index of happiness. But our studies reveal that positive emotions or most positive feelings are the most important component of happiness, followed by life satisfaction and flourishing. Negative effect or negative feelings are the least important component in predicting happiness or determining happiness. And if you looked in the global survey and the World Bank survey and others, they measure the happiness on a 10-point ladder, as I have shown you earlier. Most possible conditions of life at 0, and at the 10-point, most possible life. Most possible life and the best possible life. And you will be asked, where you put yourself in this ladder? And as the score will move from 0 to 10, accordingly your extent of happiness can be predicted. That's the way how the global survey in happiness is done by the World Bank. Similarly, there are numerous instruments to measure happiness, from Oxford University to life satisfaction scale to many, even one items. Like a ladder can measure the happiness, so also what percentage of the time you are happy, unhappy or neutral, I can ask you. And the neutral, when I ask you, that is more close to the happiness side rather than to the unhappiness side. and that will predict to what extent you are happy. Similarly, in the Eastern world, we give importance to the emotional stability, interpersonal relationship, personal growth, and these are the index. And at the same time, peace of mind, these are the importance given in the Eastern society. In spite of these things, what is common to that? Next slide, please. What is common to all these things is that. Next slide, please. Ankur. These are some of the measures we have given. These are in one side, you will be finding these are the positive emotions, these are the negative emotions. This is the life satisfaction, one item we have changed, and these are the flourishing items. But next slide, please. But what ultimately happiness measures? It is a domain that comes under quality of life. It is associated with the conditions of life. And there are two conditions that define good life, and it is the good life that defines happiness. And extrinsic good life is there, intrinsic good life is there. Satisfaction with life, feeling positive emotions frequently, having a meaning and purpose in life, enjoying personal freedom, having the peace of mind, that confined to the individuals. And that's why we call it intrinsic good life. Extrinsic good life, social relationship, education, standard of living, government rules and regulations, the infrastructure provided by the government, and including the availability of infrastructure, accessibility of the infrastructure, and the utilization of socio-economic infrastructure. In Calcutta, when we measured this, we did a study on Calcutta. When we measured that happiness of the inhabitants of Calcutta New Town, we have measured their standard of living, educational level, their health status. These indicators, prime indicators, were taken as an index of happiness. Perhaps if I recall, there are 7-8 items, and we have used the analog scale from 10% to 100%, and where the person will put himself or herself. Say, for example, your condition of life. Satisfaction with the condition of your life, 10%, 20%, 30%, it will go up to 100%. Where you will put yourself? And when you measure this, it was somewhere around, when you aggregated across all the items, what you find that it is around 7.1. And in second phase, when you carried out the study after 1 year, there was no change in happiness. Little change, but that was not a very significant change. Little change in happiness occurred. In New Town, Calcutta, we have studied. Along with that, the neighboring areas of Calcutta city was also studied. So therefore, it is the intrinsic life conditions, intrinsic good life and extrinsic good life. Extrinsic good life not only depends upon the individual, he may have the employment. But at the same time, there must be scope, infrastructure, and the individual must have access to them, and he must utilize that things to get the employment. Educational services may be there, but the availability will go, he must have the access to the infrastructure, availability of the infrastructure, and at the same time, he must utilizing the infrastructure. This is called the extrinsic good life. Similarly, social relations, you have to go interact with others. This is outside your self-domain. So these two things taken together, they define the happiness. So happiness is ultimately the good life. It includes intrinsic good life, contains your peace of mind, contains the calmness, contains the satisfaction with life, what you experience as an individual, what is external through the external to yourself, that is called the extrinsic good life, and all these things together that define the happiness of the individuals. And this happiness is also time contingent, and it is country contingent or place contingent. That means it depends upon place and time. The way the variables that were determining the happiness, or the way we are feeling the happiness before the pandemic, we are not feeling the same way during the pandemic. And how long it will take to regain our happiness what was before the pandemic, it can only be told by doing a scientific research. It may take 2 years or more after the pandemic is over, because any traumatic event that takes 2 or more years to dissipate its effect. And this is also context-wise different. Say, for example, you are measuring happiness at work. Happiness at work and the general happiness will differ. Because what I experience as happiness at work, defining the intrinsic and extrinsic life, as well as accommodating the positive and negative emotions, it includes the engagement. To what extent the person has the vigor, dedication, and absorption in work. That we call the engagement. And he has a positive feelings towards the work, and at the same time he is cognitively evaluating that. About the working conditions, about the salary, about the fringe benefits, about the relationship with superior subordinates, about the nature of the job, about the scope of growth, all these things taken together will define the job satisfaction and affective commitment. That is the positive emotional attachment to the organization. Individual employees' attachment to the organization will define the positive emotional attachment, what we call as effective commitment. All these things together, the literature now justifies that all these things together can measure the satisfaction at work. So it is time contingent and it is also place contingent. Next slide, please. So ultimately what we have, happiness has many benefits, and happy people live longer. Happy people, they are having a more productive career. They get quick promotions. Their immune system is stronger, so they are not susceptible to diseases. And at the same time, they have a very stable marriage. They are creative. And they have a flourishing life. Knowing that these are the benefits of happiness, can we not be happy? More than 225 studies by Sonja and his colleagues, they reveal this thing, and it was published in one of the top tier journal in psychology, that is Psychological Bulletin. So happy people have stable marriage, they live longer, and they have stable jobs, they have a stable life, they have a profession, they have a good profession, they have a reputation in their job, and many more positive things happen if you are happy. Next slide, please. So therefore, knowing those things, can you not be happy? Can you not be happy knowing those things? There are many benefits. Next slide, please. So therefore, if you look into the theories, they also locate the resources for happiness. There are many theories, but anyway, I will content with 3 theories in gist. One theory mentions that positive emotions is the impetus for happiness. If you are vibrating frequently with positive emotions and less frequently with the negative emotions, then you are happy. That is in broad and build theory. Still another theory thinks, another theory justifies that emotion is not the central focus. The central focus is the activities. That means if you do any positive activities, you will experience the positive emotions and that will lead to happiness. Positive activity means act of kindness and act of giving, act of expressing the compassion and empathy for others. These are some positive activities, doing something good for others, making other people even happy. These positive activities brings the happiness within individuals. Still another theory proposes, another important theory proposes that the need satisfaction is the basis for happiness. The extent, when we say satisfaction, what does it mean? It means to what extent our needs are met. Needs includes your physiological needs. Needs include your interpersonal needs, safety and security needs, esteem needs, self-actualization needs, spiritual needs. These are in ladder. To what extent your needs are satisfied, accordingly the person will be happy. More your needs, all these needs are satisfied, you will be more happy. Next slide, please. Another theory, they proposes that not only the basic needs, but also curiosity, challenge, and achievement, they are the innate needs within the individual. This says that if these innate needs are satisfied within the individual, it will find in the child. They have a lot of curiosity, They have a lot of desire to do certain things, and they have a lot of challenge. Even if they are small kids, they have the imagination like that. They can build a tower. If you give the different components, they can build a tower. They have a lot of curiosity or exploratory tendency. These are also innate human needs. And similarly, another theory that prominently positions happiness that comes from the character strength and virtues by Seligman. He speaks that his opinion, initial book on character strength and virtues, he has mentioned, out of which 24 characters came out. Character strength. That if we cultivate the values of wisdom, courage, justice, humanity, temperance or moderation, and transcendence or believing in something higher, we express our woes as well as happiness and share with him. That is transcendent, believing in something which is superior or higher. If these are the things you cultivate, then you will be the happiest persons. Of course, social comparison is not required because happy people, they live by their own comparison. They do not live by relative comparison. Even if it is there, I do not subscribe to this sort of thought. Because happy people are generous, they want to make other people happy, and they are not selfish in their orientation, and that makes them happy. Accordingly, the factors or the interventions that is required are designed. Whether you can inculcate the positive virtues within the individual, whether we can inculcate the positive emotions, whether you can engage in positive activities, all these things gives a direction for the intervention of happiness. Many factors may relate. You may say that income. Yes, income is required, definitely. You cannot say that standards of living is not associated. Happiness is a condition of good life. For income, health, education, these are the prime things. Security, these are the things we must have in order to be happy. Another component, the mental component, peace, serenity. This is another component, intrinsic within the individuals. And it gives a holistic picture, not that somebody is having a laughing face, we will call that he is happy. You can call it, but you are erroneous in that. Happiness does not come by showing a happy face all the time. People perceive the person is happy. But happiness originally germinates from the conditions of life, how well you are in your conditions of life. That will give you the inner happiness as well as external happiness. Extrinsic happiness as well as intrinsic happiness. Next slide, please. So therefore, in poor countries where studies are carried out, money is one of the ingredients. But in rich countries, that is not the situation. After a particular level, the happiness declines. That means you have sufficient now, and if you add more money to the living of the people or the person is earning, that will not add to happiness. Similarly, education. Education also higher the level, you have the skill set, you will be happy. But in our own study, you find a contradiction. It is the quality of education that matters rather than the number of years studied in educational institutions. Health, definitely healthy person. There is a lot many factors. Relationship associates with happiness. Health, better health associates with happiness, both physical and mental. Income associates with happiness in a country like India. So health, education, income, relationship, all these things are the ingredient of happiness. Next, please, next. Skip the slides now. Skip the slides. Skip the slides. One of the important studies in that direction, it was some diary study. You know, the diary was studied from 20 to 80 years of the nuns. This was one of the classic journals. And what they have found, that the nuns in the American, the nuns were studied, and some of them were in their 80s. After 6 decades, they found that the diaries, those diaries which contains more positive emotions. They studied the diaries and they found that the diaries which contain more positive emotions, they lived. 6 decades later, they were happy and jolly and they survived. Similarly, happy people commit less accidents. They have a less chance to commit accidents. Next slide, please. Next. Similarly, their work performance is higher. Next, you skip these slides. They are more creative. In one of our studies, we also found we found we have taken 100 happy students and we induced the happy and sad mode. And we found that what happens in happy mood and sad mood, we have given them critical jobs of decision making and why they have taken a decision that was analyzed. And we found that people, when they are in slight happy mood, not completely happy, or you can say they are in slight state of unhappiness, that is the stage where they are more fluent, original, and flexible in idea generation in describing why they are taking a specific decisions. There is more originality, there is more flexibility, they are fluent in their decision making. Decisions. These were the attributes that we find from the write-ups of the people when they were in happy mode, then compared to the people those who are in sad mode. Sad does not mean that we have induced a state. It does not mean that they will go to the stage of bereavement and they will be extremely unhappy. Slightly unhappy stage. That was the thing, that they were more fluent, they are original or flexible. That means at the moderate level of happiness, that fluency, originality and flexibility occurs and the decision making much more becomes genuine. Next slide, please. Next slide. 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 Next. Okay, here you keep. Previous one you keep. Previous one. Here there is a pie chart. Previous one, please. This one. Okay. Here there is a pie chart. What it says, and this pie chart has guided the research for about 6 decades or more than that. What it says, that 50% of the happiness is determined by genetic factors. Only 10% by the life circumstances and 40% by the happiness promoting activities, or this life satisfaction intentional activities combined together, they define the day-to-day activities that we engage in. So therefore, people thought that happiness is more determined by genetic rather than there is a genetic set point. Even if we try, we cannot be happy. Some of you know that the environment also modulates the genetic factors. That is obvious. Later on, this finding is challenged, some of the classic study. And it has been found that 40% is contributed by genetic and rest 60% may be environmental. There is still controversy. But as you know, brain has a plasticity, and by that plasticity, the environment will modulate even the genetic factors. You may have a genetically endowed to be a leader, but if you do not find an environment conducive to be a leader, you cannot be a leader. So therefore, we have a lot to do. We can change our level of happiness. This is the good message. And even if that has guided research that is controversial and completely challenged, and it was only an approximate figure that they have got, this happiness chart says that 50% genetic, which is challenged. And the day-to-day activities and the happiness promoting activities we engage in on everyday life, that will increase your level of happiness. That's why what we can do. Therefore, in order to promote your level of happiness, what you can do, next slide please. I will give you, there are many things in there. Expressing gratitude, practicing acts of kindness, showing the resilience, optimistic thinking, being hopeful about the future, forgive the others, think of the moments when you have some joy and happiest moment in your life, recall it, cultivate good relationships, and having a purpose and meaning in life and commit to it. And similarly, engaging in spiritual activities like puja, yoga, meditation, kirtan, and so on. Engaging in physical activities, of course, nowadays many of the yogic practices are also physical exercise, because the basic yogic practices starts with clockwise and anti-clockwise movement, and it is synchronized with the respirations. And it is both associated, the yogic practices are associated with the physical improvement as well as the mental peace. Because by yogic practices, clockwise, anti-clockwise, the body gets the oxygen. When you respire in and when you take the respiration or the respiration is out, when you leave the respiration, go in and go out, in the process, the body gets the oxygen. So physically the mind becomes agile, and in the practice, the mind becomes calm. One of the greatest benefit of the yogic practices. So both the things come together. Similarly, you can music also, it can also be a impetus for happiness. Let's say, for example, some old people are there, ghazal will be more, they will bring the mental peace. Similarly, for young people, that is the rock music that can make them more excited, happy. This is a momentary happiness, not a lasting happiness. Lasting happiness is attained when both intrinsic and extrinsic good life is attained. Next slide, please. Next, skip. Here, previous one. Seligman, he mentioned that in order to be happy, what you most of can do. Of course, happiness does not prescribe any specific things because it depends upon the culture, depends upon your whether it matches with your values and whether your society approves it. All these things, your personality. So the intervention you make for yourself to be happy, that should be unique to yourself. However, some of the clues we are providing, we are not saying that these are the blanket clues and these are the blanket ways and written on the rock to be happy. There cannot be a one uniform formula to be happy. But however, some rudimentary thing can be done to promote the happiness as it is done in Delhi schools. The children are made happy. Similarly, the Seligman mentioned that think of 3 good things. These are also called 3 blessings. That has happened today. And before you go to sleep, write down on the diary. It is not just writing the diary. Reflect on what happened. Could have been better. So if you are writing what is happening, it is just like a mind conditioning. You are conditioning your mind, remembering the 3 things and why it happened, and had it been better, had I could done better in that situation. Okay? And at the same time, you are agreeing that these are the good things and why it happened. And when you are conditioning your mind with positive thoughts. Similarly, you can take a mind conditioning. Long back in 90s, we thought of that and wrote about it. Just for today, I will be honest. Just close your eyes, sit here anywhere and just utter yourself, don't make sound. Within yourself, you prepare 8-10 statements that is a hurdle for you in your professional life or in your personal life. And you repeat against that to be happy. If you are angry, write that just for today, I will not express my anger. If you are making others angry or unhappy or making them depressed through your talk, just for today, I will make others happy. Just reverse the statement, what is posing a problem to you. This is also a similar mind conditioning procedure. Whether you are traveling in the train or you are walking on whether you are sitting in a room or reading the book, for 5-10 minutes, 8 statements you prepare for yourself and repeat to condition your mind with positive thoughts that will remove your barriers in your professional life or personal life that is awkward to you as well awkward to others. And there are many elaborate versions of this. Next slide, please. Next. I will not show this. Next slide, please. Next, please. Next. You know about grateful interventions. The grateful interventions speak that I am grateful every week. You can no, you just remain there. You wish, okay. Grateful intervention speaks that something is doing something good for you. You can write grateful letters or express your kindness, act of kindness. Like Ricky, who erected the center in IIT Kharagpur, he went to the jail and offered the food to the person who was in jail. That gave him happiness because the person was happy when the food was offered to him by an outsider like Ricky, and at the same time Ricky also felt happy. It is an act of kindness. If somebody is doing something for you, we should be grateful to that. In spite of that, in current day, in order to get the job done and sometimes being aggressive, we become arrogant. Humility is not there. Humility is the greatest asset in the hands of a leader or executive. Many people are not humble, they are aggressive. This gratitude, letter writing, or showing the act of kindness, these are the things which comes from within. And it is contaminated, or it is based on empathy and sympathy. And these are the human virtues for others, those who are in trouble. Similarly, you do things in new ways. And these are the 25 characteristics. There are many ways you do it. Suppose you are going for a morning walk every day, you can change the route and go in another directions. Somebody can sit in the nature and he can love the nature. Somebody may have a goal in life and he will decide the goal and pursue it continuously to achieve the goal. So there are many interventions that you can justify for yourselves. There is no size that fits to all. But what minimally we can do, like in the Himalayan country of Bhutan, where Sandhuji was there, the king has thought, in spite of gross domestic happiness, gross domestic income, we will say gross national happiness. So what he did, let the conditions of living will be good, and at the same time mental peace and mental serenity will be there. All these things together can measure the happiness or being about happiness. And this is also many governments are also doing. And recent studies also revealing that these are the factors: income, employment, and at the same time standard of living, health, all these things, relationship, they fulfill happiness. Whether they are the correlates or they are the causes, only in experimental design or a longitudinal study you can derive about the causes. But if it is a large scale study, and with so many bootstrapping, causal invitation will not be erroneous. So therefore, the justification comes that, next slide please. The justification comes that, and there are 24 character strengths how you can do it in new ways. Everything you can do it in new ways. And if you do it in new ways, that will give you a sense of happiness. Every time you are curious, inventing and doing the things in new ways, that will give you the happiness. Next slide, please. Next. Please hold on. Similarly, spiritual activities. The art of living of Gurudev. Spiritual activities. Somebody may find somebody may find engaging in puja, or engaging in yoga and meditation, or somebody doing the kirtan. All these are spiritual activities. And similarly, volunteering for certain work, that will make you happy. Exercise, physical exercise, good food, nutritious food. Somebody may watch the nature and get the happiness. So there are various ways. And the recent study of the next slide, please. Next. I think it is not there. So go to the previous one. It is perhaps an old slide, I think. Okay, anyway, I will discuss that. Next slide is that it says that happiness, you have to decide your menu depending upon your culture, depending on your personality, depending on your time availability, and depending upon your choice. And if you decide to be happy, the happiness menu resides within you. You have to discover yourself. But unfortunately, we people think about others, never think about ourselves. That is the tragedy in all human civilization. And second, some of the things that common you can practice, easily you can do it. Do many things in new ways. Curiosity, achievement to attain the goal of your life. Exploratory tendency for new things. Act of kindness. Gratitude for others. A sense of humility will bring you the happiness within you if you try for that. But if you try for the happiness of common people, then both the ingredients are necessary. One is the intrinsic happiness, another is the extrinsic life. Extrinsic good life and intrinsic good life. then only something happiness will come. You measure the happiness of any people you go during the pandemic, you will find suddenly a drop in the happiness level. Because the conditions of life has worsened during the pandemic compared to the situation before the pandemic. I think I will stop here. If you have any question, you can ask questions.
Thank you, sir, for this wonderful talk. So, any questions from the audience? Yes, Shopurna, you can ask your question directly.
Oh, yes, you can.
1 second, sir. I might start my video. Yes. Sir, since you said that, thank you for the talk, first of all. Since you said that happiness is a holistic combination, both intrinsic and extrinsic factors, what I want to know is, does an extrinsic factor influence the intrinsic one in a opposite way? I mean, for example, that example I wrote, that is, an extrinsic factor is COVID has happened or lockdown has happened. An intrinsic factor is I get to spend more time with my family, which is the extrinsic one is not so positive, but the intrinsic one is positive. So yes. Is the person more happy now or
no, that you have given the example of an exceptional situation. Yeah. Because a crisis or a pandemic is an exceptional situation.
Yes,
it's like a normal situation. Say, for example, I have got some help from the government, thereby I improved my agriculture, my income has improved, then this will positively propel your happiness. Okay. But here you have given an example which is exceptional situation. Don't bring the exception to contradict some generalized observation, but your observation is completely correct. I do agree with you.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Gokul Muthu, you could go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, sir. Sir, so you had mentioned that every day in the night you can make this wove kind of thing. So when we say just for today I will not be angry, something like that, like will that not lead to more complication because of suppression?
No, because when the message is that you are finding certain difficulties in your professional life. Say, for example, you meet a client or a customer, you get angry. And once you get angry, because happiness is a contagion effect. Everything you do has the effect on the others. The other person will be unhappy, the whole discussion will go wrong, or if you are trying to clinch a deal, it will not able to do so. So likewise, if you are frequently, you reflect on yourself. What are the things that are decreasing your effectiveness in personal or professional life? Just reverse this pattern. That is my intention. Thereby, it is not that you say it one day. Every day when you are going 8-10 statements you are writing, or you are uttering it silently, closing your eyes. It is basically a mind conditioning procedure. All your awkward behavior, negative behavior are gradually stamped out, and the positive behavior is getting stamped in. Thereby, it will make you effective. That was the content, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Raj Purohit, sir, you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Professor Damodar. It's wonderful presentation. I have a question to ask. Whether it is intrinsic or extrinsic, or by all your efforts remaining positive, you're attempting to drive happiness consciously, knowingly that you want to be happy, therefore you make all efforts to be happy. But that is only tip of the iceberg. What about the unconscious mind and going beyond and attaining a rhythm wherein you are happy forever, always, all the time, any situation? Can I call it detached attachment? Unconsciously remaining happy, or something else? Could you throw some light on it, please?
Yes, when you are saying some people are genetically happy, consciously means there is some conditioning and coding. Happiness is two things. One is some genetic coding, or there is some conditioning. Remember, this is the basics of happiness, whether you call it conscious or unconscious, whatever name you give. But you can mark some of the child, when they take birth, they are very jolly. They move their hands and legs. They will see the people, even a small infant, they will laugh. You will find that there is genetic coding is there. There is no consciousness. Spontaneously it will come. That means there is some genetic coding is there, by virtue of which is acting in that way. So in spite of conscious and unconscious, I call it the genetic coding. You can mark it in a small kid. Just after taking birth, forget about that. He is not conscious about the world. Spontaneously, like a reflex action, it is coming. But his other child will find just the reverse. It will not come spontaneously. What does it mean? That means there is definitely genetic coding. But at the same time, when you grow up as an individual, you can modulate it through your environmental experiences. Also, you have a lot to contribute to the environment. If you are optimistic, if you are hopeful, spontaneously it will happen to you. Consciously, you may drive for happiness, but unconsciously, in due course of time, you will find that your behavior changing and spontaneously coming to you. Consciously, you are trying to it, and once the consciousness becomes a habit, it reflected in your unconscious behavior, and spontaneously it comes to you. Have I answered your question?
Yes, please. In fact, I am presenting a paper tomorrow wherein I'm trying to establish happiness through wilderness into the world of unconsciousness. How is it that consciously I'm trying to be happy, but I always want to be happy? Whatever genes my parents gave me, they gave me. But what do I do?
No.
Unconsciously.
This is a lot of controversy there.
Yes, sir.
That pie diagram I have shown you, 50-40-10. That is the ratio. 50-40-10. 50% is genetic. But it has been challenged. And again, it came to same 70-10-20 like that. But now they are thinking that it is some papers are coming up which says, even in Netherlands, some research it is becoming 30. Also, you have to remember, even if I am genetically endowed, being a conscious adult, I have the ability to modulate that genetic factor. It depends upon the environment, depends upon the type of person you are, how optimistic, hopeful, and how resilient you are. You can convert an adverse situation to an opportunity. That is up to you. It is not that I will not try and somebody all the time I will leave it on unconscious and like a reflex action, it will come to me. That may happen in case of a child, but not in case of adult. You are a conscious individual, many of us. Of course, many of us never thought of what is the purpose of our life. Whatever comes in our way, we do it. But the point here is that we have to look into it, and being a conscious adult, I must try something. If I do not do, then I will falter. And I may fail in my journey of life. So you being an individual, you have certain responsibility. Environment have certain facilitating. If the environment is not conducive, then what happens? Many of the good people, they turn out to be gundas. I have seen in my school days, there are many good students. Later on, they become the vagabond. They dropped out from the schools. Why? It is the environment which modulates the genetic factors. And there is a strong argument, even in intelligence, personality, which are highly predicted to be genetically determined. Now a strong set of evidence is coming up that the environment we know about brain plasticity. Environment can modulate these things. Environment means our social environment, our parents, family members, societal members, all they constitute the environment. And this environment gives some input in me, and accordingly I can modulate the things, genetic factors. That is up to me. Why can't I do that? If I leave everything on the genetic factors, as if I am a docile person doing nothing for myself. Do something for yourself within your limit. At the same time, understand what is the constraint, what is the barrier, can I cross the barrier? All these questions you have to analyze and answer yourself. Unfortunately, many people never ask what is the purpose of my life. They do the things what comes in their way. That way we become failure in our life. And happiness, when you are saying, it depends upon life events. Even if, suppose the death of a loved one, suddenly the happiness will drop down. You have won a lottery, the happiness will go off. So these are also situational promoters and demoters of happiness. But these are temporary things. They will come down within 2-3 weeks. If it is a traumatic event, then it may make 2 years or more than that to come to the best level. So that is the point of my thing. Why can't we do something to promote our own happiness? There are many things that can be done. You think for yourself and decide. We have given some basic menu.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
So the next question is more or less related to this, which is also on how do we define happiness for ourselves?
Are you internally? I will ask you some questions and you write whether you are yes or no. Or you answer the question, to what extent of the time you are happy, unhappy or neutral. Write it yourself. I will answer the question.
So Dushyant Soniji, whose question this is, please answer to sir's question.
Or that means you are internally peaceful, external conditions are conducive, your economic status is good, your living standard, your education, all these things are external promoter, but internally you are optimistic, you have a hopeful, you are resilient, and at the same time you have some external supporting factors that will define supporting or non-supporting factors. Both the things will combination will define your happiness. Suppose you are a graduate student in engineering. What happens? Many of our graduate students, we have found out around 20, 25, 30 indicators of happiness. We have asked them open-ended questions. I feel happy, fill the blanks. Even going to the nature, teaching people, they define the happiness in this way, relationships. But again, like the Harvard study, which has continued for 70 years, we got the same impressions. That interpersonal relationship is the most important propeller of happiness. Good relationship with the community, good relationship with the friends, good relationship with parents, good relationship with your friends and all that, that will beget happiness. Relationship is the major ingredient for happiness. If you are a community man living in a village, your relationship with the family, with the members as well as the community members will define your happiness. In decision making, in resource sharing, okay, in making a judgment, major judgment in your life, how much is there? The more you have the relationship, better the relationship, you will feel more happy within. That's the thing. So take the internal and some external promoters and define your happiness. You realize what is, you are in the ladder, you put yourself where you fall. Whether you have the worst possible conditions of life 0, then in the best possible conditions of life where you fall. At 7, then your happiness is 7 out of 10, it is 0.7 out of 1. If it is in 2, that means 0.2 is your happiness out of 1, 20%. You can find out. Because when I ask this question to you, it takes a whole gamut of life into consideration. Unconsciously or impulse will come where I'll put my response. How do you define the conditions of life? That's the thing. That is how the global happiness index is prepared in different countries. Asking this simple one question. So there are also other ways. Say for example, I will take your EEG, mental brain waves recording. Alpha, beta, gamma, theta, all these things. From the brain waves I can have how calmness you have. During the meditation or during the exercise, don't take it. Otherwise it will vanish. The effect will vanish. Just before the meditation or after the meditation, if I detect the calmness is coming from your brainwaves, then there is a state of happiness within you. Scientists also look into that.
So we have another question is from Baipan Roy, who asked that, sir, whenever I carry ample money in pocket, whenever I'm going out, I feel more secure. Is there any correlation of money with happiness?
Yes, yes, there is a correlation in developing country like India. We have a strong correlation. Also in the friends group, you have a lot of gadgets, phones, cell phones, sophisticated cell phones, computers, gizmo, what we call a gizmo and all that you can purchase. You can have a comfortable life. You can have lunch and dinner with your friends and all that. That will give you a social status. That will make you happy also. But that is not the only indicator of happiness. Once you the same person, you ask me the question after 40 years. You will find a different answer from me. Because your happiness promoter will be locus of happiness, or locus of happiness will be somewhere in other place. maybe in spiritual activities, maybe looking to the children and the grandparents, maybe in promoting the well-being of others. There your locus of happiness will reside. You will do that, you will feel the inner joy. You will feel the joy within. Okay? So therefore, what answer you are getting from me now, after 40 years, if you are a young guy, my answer will differ and you will realize that also. Have I answered your question? I don't know.
Darpan, if you are there somewhere, you could say.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Absolutely fine, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for the insights.
So thank you so much, sir. We've come to the end of the questions. It was so nice listening to you. As always, it was a very enriching experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all friends for giving me an opportunity. I must acknowledge my gratitude to Priyadarshi and the members of Raki Center for considering me to give a talk on this topic. Where I'm learning, I'm not expert in this field. Let me submit to that. Still I'm learning and every day I'm thinking on that. Of course, this is not my area of research, but still from somewhere here and there, I did that. And I'm grateful to all of you for giving me the opportunity to address all of you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
So I can close the session. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So, Shi, would you like to say something, or do I close the session?
No, I mean, I've been trying to reach Professor Rautra for quite some time, but I could not reach him. I should have reminded him in the morning, which I could not. I'm sorry for that. But anyway, I've tried in many ways. But he's in the US and it's midnight for him, so it is difficult to reach him now. So I'll request you to close the session.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and asking very interesting questions that kept the sessions going, and it was really nice playing the role of the moderator out here. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope to see you soon again in the other sessions to follow.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Orchi, you could tell about the cultural program, I guess.
Yes. Orchi, if you want to do that, you can go ahead.
And another thing is we are going to request Professor Rautra for a recording, 20 minutes recording, and probably will be, if he agrees, then we'll be able to play that during some of the breaks of our conference. And also we have a cultural program scheduled from 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. So it's 7:30 p.m. onwards. I don't think, I mean, preponing it will be very wise because people are already informed like that. So we will meet at 7:30 again.
In the same link.
In the same link for the cultural program. Whoever wishes to join, please welcome all of you.
Inform others also. If they are
inform others also, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.